Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're immersing ourselves in source material that honestly feels less like typical research and more like, well, like reading an open, wounded human heart.
It really does. We're looking at excerpts from the memoir, The Red Thread of Gratitude, and it charts this journey through just profound emotional collapse.
Yeah, seeking not just, survival, but really digging into this hard-won, necessary truth about self-love.
Exactly. So our mission, if you will, is to really analyze this journey, moving from that absolute isolation towards realizing that destiny sometimes has to step in, maybe even brutally.
It's definitely a sobering task. And you're right, the source material demands a certain gravity, a respect for its weight.
It does. The author doesn't really ease us in, does she? She starts right at the point of complete narrative disintegration.
No preamble.
None. She taps into that universal crushing feeling. There are moments in life when one believes all is lost. And this isn't just like philosophical despair she's talking about.
No, it feels much more visceral, like a physical, mental, emotional environment where the ground just vanishes beneath your feet. The familiar road, as she puts it.
Right, the road vanishes entirely.
I think that image, the vanished road, is so crucial here. It really signifies that point where you feel like you've lost all agency, doesn't it?
Completely. The map you've always relied on, maybe it's your career, your family structure, your old ways of coping, suddenly it's just useless. Blank paper.
And when that roadmap disappears, you're left in this terrifying, unnavigable void. It feels like that's the required state almost, that absolute hopelessness before even the faintest glimmer of recovery can start.
Precisely. That sense of being completely unmoored sets this intense, melancholic tone for the whole piece.
Yeah.
It suggests that whatever system she had in her life before, they just catastrophically failed her.
Right.
And if you look at it psychologically, this moment of collapse is almost necessary, isn't it? Because it forces the kind of radical reevaluation that eventually leads her to discover this red thread concept.
You have to see the old structure is gone before you can even think about a new foundation.
Exactly. You have to acknowledge the wreckage.
Okay, but before we really get into the details of the crisis and the escape, maybe we should just anchor this a little. Remind ourselves, and you listening, that this intense suffering belongs to a real person.
Yes, absolutely. We must. The author identifies herself quite clearly. She is Vanina Vergara, or CV Vergara, as she's known in the English-speaking world.
Okay.
Born in Asunción, Paraguay.
Nada más.
And crucially, she mentions she's a mother of 3 children whom she loves deeply.
And that context feels really important, doesn't it? Because it shows the kind of breakdown that can happen even when someone is, fundamentally anchored by immense love and responsibility.
Right. It shows that the external structures of life, they don't always protect you from internal devastation. Sometimes the storm is just too strong inside.
Okay, so let's move into that really painful period now. That deep isolation, the time before things started to shift. The memoir really focuses on this overwhelming motivation. Simply fleeing suffocation. She asks that stark question, when the world collapses around you and the echo of your own footsteps is your only companion, where do you go?
Wow. That phrase, the echo of your own footsteps.
Yeah.
It paints such a stark, lonely picture, doesn't it?
It really does. You can almost hear it.
Yeah, it's a sensory description of profound solitude. Like the very air is heavy with the absence of others.
And the memoir is, as you said, uncompromising here about her motive.
Yeah.
This movement, this running, it wasn't about finding light or answers.
Oh, not at all.
It was purely, desperately an escape. The fuel was negative, wasn't it? Running from the solitude that felt like it was suffocating her.
It's the ultimate defense mechanism against imploding, really.
Yeah.
Fleeing the feeling itself.
And what's fascinating, I think, is how the physical act, running, becomes this almost desperate form of self-medication.
Yeah.
She sought refuge, she says, not in quiet reflection or anything like that, but in the pavement, in the rhythm of her stride. Running became her sole means of not thinking, which just highlights the sheer terror of grief when it's left unchecked, right?
Absolutely. It suggests that if she stopped moving, the thoughts, the pain, which would just overwhelm her completely, ground her.
That feels like the core of that pre-recovery defense. When the internal landscape is just too hostile, too dangerous, the only option feels like external momentum, constant motion.
We see that a lot in trauma response, don't we? That need for speed, for constant activity, anything to just silence that internal monitor that's screaming about the collapse.
Yeah.
She admits she wasn't even breathing freely. She was running literally as a way to breathe without choking on the grief that was all around her.
And this state, this profound woundedness, it drove her to actively reject any potential comfort, especially love.
Right.
She's very clear. I sought nothing, and least of all, love. And then she asks, for who would dare when the heart is so deeply wounded?
That hits hard. When you're hemorrhaging emotionally like that, the idea of opening yourself up again, becoming vulnerable, it feels like just reckless endangerment.
Like tempting fate to strike again.
Exactly. It's a completely rational response, in a way, to overwhelming irrational trauma. If life has just shown you that safety is an illusion, well, the best defense seems like absolute closure. Shutting down. The instinct is just to push away anything, anyone that might inflict another wound. And the memoir acknowledges that feeling, that universal sense of the weight upon the chest, that feeling that life itself just grows too heavy.
Yeah.
And that heaviness, it paralyzes hope. It makes it impossible to even imagine things getting better.
And I appreciate that the author really refuses to indulge in that cliche, you know, that pain immediately leads to wisdom or something.
Absolutely.
She actually pauses the narrative to state this profound truth. I will not romanticize pain. It hurts. It hurts profoundly.
That's such a crucial grounding element, isn't it?
Thank
It
you.
validates anyone listening who might be going through their own suffering. It says, yes, this is exhausting, it's brutal, it's not some quick cinematic transformation.
Right. It acknowledges the reality of the hurt.
And that very honesty, I think, is what makes the next turn of events so compelling. Because we're dealing with this profound, exhausting hurt. And her only known survival mechanism was this constant, desperate escape.
She was running just to survive the silence. Not even aware, it seems, that running was about to lead her directly towards the very thing she was actively rejecting.
And yet,
Despite this active campaign of isolation, this rejection of connection, destiny, as she puts it, harbors its own designs.
yeah, I love that phrasing.
Me too. And here the narrative shifts, doesn't it, from that intense internal struggle to, well, an external intervention.
It does. And the moment of change wasn't some huge dramatic event. It was tied to something seemingly mundane, a deviation from a routine, that suffocating routine she built.
Just choosing a different path one Sunday morning.
Exactly. And this is where we really need to focus on the mechanics of fate or destiny in her story. She changed course, took a street I had never walked at an hour that was never mine. And she notes her old routine was just a shadow of its former self, meaning her life had already shrunk into this recognizable but pale, diminished structure.
Right. Just going through the motions.
But destiny didn't strike when she was, like, praying for a miracle or actively searching. It struck when she made this tiny, almost accidental choice to deviate from her negative pattern.
The significance of that small deviation, it feels huge in retrospect. It suggests that maybe sometimes the universe just needs that minimal act of will from us, a slight shift in our physical path to allow fate to align things.
That's how she frames it. If she hadn't broken the shadow of that routine, their paths would never have intersected.
And the encounter happened, she says, in the middle of nowhere, which emphasizes how improbable it felt. Yet, she insists it felt like fate.
It connects directly back to the psychological weight of routine during collapse. When you're suffering, routine can be a comfort, right? A form of control in the chaos.
Sure, something predictable.
But in her case, that routine was also the very mechanism of her isolation. By breaking it, just slightly, she allowed the possibility of the unexpected to enter.
And then the collision.
Yes. She describes it quite literally colliding with the person who became her everything. It wasn't some gentle meeting across a crowded room.
No.
It was two moving forces, both running, smashing into each other at this improbable crossroads.
And the beauty of it, the reciprocity. They were both fleeing, both seeking some kind of truce in the rhythm of their own strides.
Exactly. It wasn't one person standing still, waiting for a savior. It was, as she says, two lost souls who, unknowingly, had been searching for one another.
Wow.
They shared the exact same motivation to escape, which must have bonded them instantly at that moment of impact.
They knew each other from afar, she mentions, but had never actually spoken before that moment.
Right. And that instant, that serendipitous encounter, that's when she says, the pieces of my life's puzzle began to fall into place. She insists, quite forcefully, this was no accident. It was destiny. The universe conspired her word to bring them to that precise point, that exact moment, so their paths could entwine.
Okay, but I wonder, should we maybe pause here and look at that critically for a second? This narrative of the savior.
That's a fair point.
When someone arrives right at the moment of your deepest collapse, and you frame them as the person who became your everything, your refuge, the companion who saved and lifted you, Does that risk creating a relationship built more on profound dependency than, say, genuine mutual love?
That is a critical question, absolutely.
Right.
And it's one we have to address, given the weight of her words. She does frame this person as a savior initially, yes.
Right.
But I think the deeper analysis relies on that concept she introduces, the invisible, unbreakable red thread. This thread, which gives the book its title, suggests something different. Not that he became her purpose, but that he was always meant to be connected to her.
Okay, so it implies a mutual seeking, a kind of preordination that validates both their individual suffering and their eventual meeting.
I think so. The red thread shifts the burden away from simple dependency, or one person rescuing another. It suggests their collision wasn't just about one person needing rescue, but about two destined entities finally connecting to complete a shared picture.
Bound us together once again, never to let go. That phrasing suggests a pre-existing connection, maybe.
Exactly. It provides this sense of retroactive meaning to all the chaos that came before. It suggests the suffering wasn't just random awfulness. It was the necessary, painful path to finding this specific connection.
So the universe conspired to save her, but through a shared fate, not just sending a rescuer.
Precisely. And the term she uses for him, refuge and steadfast companion, implies stability, durability. That's quite different from the fleeting support of a temporary savior figure.
Right. Steadfast implies consistency.
Yes. So this pivotal moment, born from just breaking a routine, transforms the random pain into a necessary part of a grander design. A design ultimately written in hope.
Okay, so moving past that serendipitous beginning, that collision, the author then transitions, doesn't she, into the core philosophical lesson that she says took decades to really sink in.
Yeah, she moves from the almost romantic notion of the collision to the much more, well, brutal reality of the necessary inner work, which is self-love. Self-love is the key.
And what really stands out there, for me at least, is the timeline.
Oh, definitely.
This wasn't some instant realization that came with the relationship. She says it took nearly 50 years for her to synthesize these lessons, half a century.
Half a century. That timeline alone tells you everything about how excruciating a process self-love can be. It's not a light bulb moment, is it?
No, far from it. The depth of those internal wounds, the years she spent, as she says, self-silencing, it demanded that agonizingly long time.
And the realization itself, she calls it brutal, not gentle. Why brutal, do you think?
Well, I think because it requires such radical accountability, maybe. A willingness to confront all those decades of self-neglect. That self-silencing she mentioned earlier from her past, the little girl who learned to silence herself. It means reversing a lifetime of learned behavior, of putting herself last. That is brutal work.
That feels like the essential insight. She's really pushing back against the often commercialized, gentle, bubble bath notions of self-care we see everywhere.
Yeah, the trendy version.
Exactly. She declares, self-love is not a luxury nor a trend, it is a necessity. Self-love is the key. By stripping away that trend status, she elevates it, makes it a fundamental survival mechanism, a non-negotiable requirement for anyone who's been through that kind of collapse.
And the real substance, I think, lies in how she defines it. She heads off that common misconception straight away. Loving yourself is emphatically not about looking in the mirror and declaring, I am perfect.
Right, because as she rightly says, none of us are. That immediately moves the concept out of some impossible realm of aspiration and brings it down to earth, into reality.
So if it's not perfection, what is it?
Well, if self-love depended on perfection, we'd all fail every single morning, wouldn't we?
Pretty much.
Instead, she offers this definition rooted in radical acceptance and inherent worthiness. It's about being able to say, with my scars, with my wrinkles, with my mistakes, with my stormy nights, I still deserve to be well.
Wow, that's powerful. It's a declaration of worth that exists completely independently of your performance, your successes or failures. It accepts the whole package, the damaged self included.
Exactly. And that concept, that deserved wellness, is immediately tied to action. This is where the brutal part really becomes concrete. Self-love demands discipline. It demands effort, especially when you're facing the kind of depression and grief that characterize her collapse.
Right, it's not just a feeling, it's doing.
Yes. The source gives us 3 really crucial, demanding actions that show this brutal self-love in practice. First, it's rising when the body feels as heavy as stone.
Oh, I think many people can relate to that feeling, that physical manifestation of deep emotional inertia, the sheer weight of despair.
Self-love means fighting that inertia every single morning. It's an act of defiance against the collapse itself.
And the second action?
Leaning into therapeutic discomfort for the sake of long-term healing. It means going to therapy even when one has no desire to speak.
That takes commitment. Showing up for the process even when you're exhausted or numb or feel like you have nothing left to say.
Right, the mere physical act of being present in that space, that is the act of self-love sometimes.
And the third one? This one feels huge, especially given her history.
It is huge. Perhaps the most difficult for someone with that history of silence and caregiving. It is learning to ask for help, even when one has always been the one to hold everyone else.
Ooh, yeah, that's an enormous cultural hurdle, isn't it? Especially perhaps for women who've often been socialized into being the steadfast emotional anchor for everyone around them.
Absolutely. It requires a fundamental shift in your identity. To ask for help means admitting vulnerability, admitting you can't maintain that facade of holding everything together anymore.
It demands the strength to be dependent, which is a kind of strength we often mistake for weakness.
Well said. Self-love, in this context, is recognizing that sometimes the strongest thing you can possibly do is admit you're no longer strong enough on your own.
And when we reflect on her story, all those things she mentions from previous parts, the little girl silencing herself, families fractured by silence, sorrows hidden behind smiles.
All those losses, wounds, mourning.
We see the root of this lifetime struggle. All those painful things happen. But the ultimate conclusion, the victory she claims, is that despite that half-century of struggle, she can say, and yet, I am still here.
I am still here.
So what this whole section really proves is that the endurance itself, the daily rising, the decision to go to therapy, learning to ask for help, that is the living proof of the necessity of self-love. She survived that crushing weight because maybe even before she fully grasped the concept consciously, she was performing these necessary acts of self-preservation.
And reaching that conscious understanding at 50 just solidified the foundation for the rest of her life. It named the thing she'd been fighting for.
Okay, so this hard-won understanding of internal worth, of deserving wellness, it immediately pivots us, doesn't it, into the final, crucial realization in these excerpts. And it's one that can sometimes feel contradictory to the whole self-love narrative.
It can seem that way at first glance. The truth of interdependence.
Exactly. The author focuses on this critical counterpoint to her initial flight into solitude. No one saves themselves alone.
This is the essential paradox, isn't it? The journey absolutely has to be walked by you. It demands that brutal self-love we just talked about, yet you often can't cross the finish line without the hands of others reaching out.
It's like the moment of profound solitude is precisely when you have to activate your self-love by reaching out.
Yes, because even when you feel entirely, utterly solitary, she insists, there is always someone who can extend a hand. Always.
And she's careful to clarify that this help comes in many forms. It's not just the grand companion, the Pablo figure.
Right, it can be a friend, a sibling, a therapist, the people you might expect. But she also highlights the unpredictable sources of aid, the manifestation of that red thread in just everyday interactions.
The wholly unexpected intervention. That feels crucial to her whole philosophy of destiny, doesn't it?
It really does. Sometimes, she says, salvation arrives in a phrase, a hug, a message that reminds you that you still matter.
Tiny things.
Seemingly small, maybe even accidental reminders. But she frames them as the universe conspiring again, validating your worth at the exact moment you can't feel it inside yourself. They interrupt that internal monologue of worthlessness.
And in her personal story, that specific someone was Pablo, the one she collided with at that unlikely crossroads. She names him explicitly as the companion who held her when she could no longer stand, which clarifies his role, I think. Not necessarily as a rescuer pulling her from the fire, but more like an anchor during the storm, someone steady.
And this brings us back beautifully to the nuance of that savior narrative we touched on earlier. The mechanism of recovery through Pablo's love, as she describes it, is deeply analytical.
How so?
She says, for when someone shows you that your life holds worth, you slowly begin to believe it too. His love acted like a mirror.
Reflecting her own intrinsic value back at her.
Exactly. That external validation was the scaffolding she needed, the temporary support, until her own internal self-love mechanism became robust enough to take over the load.
So it's like it provided the practical training ground for self-love. She learned how to care for herself by being cared for by him.
That's a great way to put it. The feeling of being worthy of his attention, his devotion, gradually morphed into the internalized knowledge that she was simply worthy, period. The interdependence paved the way for self-sufficiency, ironically.
That's such a vital distinction, I think, for anyone listening. If you are, as she puts it, passing through your own darkness right now, the author validates that struggle, but the core message is one of hope. You can come through. But, and this is crucial, she grounds that hope in absolute reality. Recovery is not swift, it's not easy, and it is definitely not linear.
That non-linearity. That's often the most frustrating part of healing, isn't it?
Yeah.
She acknowledges it directly. Healing often means taking one step forward and two back.
Yeah.
It's an imperfect, messy process. And self-love have to include the compassion to forgive yourself for those regressions, those backward steps. You have to accept that progress is often cyclical, not just a straight line upward.
So the final affirmation really is the culmination of her whole half-century journey.
It feels like it. She concludes that every single step taken, every breath drawn, every day you choose to remain, that is a victory of its own.
Not just the breakthroughs, but the daily survival.
Exactly. Yeah. It was worth holding on, not for some grand finale, but for the mundane act of continuing. That acceptance of the struggle as victory, that feels like the ultimate expression of self-love. And the ultimate belief that her story, and by extension your story, can still be written in hope.
Wow. Okay, as we draw this deck dive to a close, let's just try to quickly recap the profound journey we've traced through these excerpts from The Red Thread of Gratitude.
It's quite a path.
It really is. We started in that place of utter emotional collapse, suffocation, fleeing a solitude that grief had basically weaponized. That flight then led, against all odds, to a pivotal, seemingly destined collision, just a mundane deviation in routine that brought the author and her companion together.
A red thread moment.
Exactly. And the profound lesson that was eventually born from that union after decades of processing was this brutal, non-negotiable understanding. Self-love isn't a luxury, it's the absolute key to survival.
But also, paradoxically, that no one saves themselves alone.
Right. The darkest hours might just be the threshold to the brightest light, but crossing that threshold requires both that radical internal commitment and the acceptance of external hands reaching out.
A powerful combination.
Before we finish, we absolutely must share the author's own closing words from this section. It's how she introduces herself, and it feels foundational to understanding her perspective. She writes, "I am Vanina Vergara, CV Vergara, to the English-speaking world, born in Asunción, Paraguay. I have 3 children whom I love deeply, and this is my life."
Simple, direct, and grounding after everything she shared. And maybe, as you listening, reflect on this powerful narrative, this idea that fate can intervene the moment we just slightly break our negative routines. Maybe challenge yourself to reflect on your own red thread. If destiny really does work by rearranging our daily paths to force necessary collisions, necessary connections, what small change in your path tomorrow? A different street, maybe. A different hour. A different, more honest answer to the question, how are you? What small shift might be waiting to bring you home?
That's a really provocative thought to end on.
And the author, Vanina Vergara, she continues to engage directly with people touched by her story. She explicitly states, "I read letters sent to mail.Vergaravanina@yahoo.com.